Today, after a little over 2 years, it's time to return to converting Minecraft into Elden Ring. The Shadow of the Erdtree DLC released about a month ago, so naturally, this is a great time to make a return. This will be a complete overhaul of the last pack I created, and I've built around most of the mods included in Part 1 as a base to start with. This includes mods like Epic Fight, providing overhauled combat that resembles the Souls games, Mousies mobs and mutant beasts, adding difficult new boss fights, a multitude of new locations to explore with a variety of structure mods, along with many new mechanics and visual changes. Plus, I've updated from 1.16.5 to 1.20.1. There are a few mods that, for one reason or another, I didn't include this time around. For the most part, I found other mods I feel provide better results, though there are a few mods I'd like to have included that just aren't updated to 1.20. I'll list the excluded mods in the description and mention exactly which mods are replacing them when they come around. So if you haven't seen Part 1 yet, definitely check it out with the link above. Now, before we approach the multitude of mods we'll be installing, I'd like to quickly mention this video sponsor, Honkai Impact 3rd. Brought to you by the developers of Genshin Impact, Honkai Impact 3rd is an action RPG that delivers beautiful visuals and intensive combat. Recently, the game debuted its largest update yet, enhancing animations, character models, scenery, and more. The latest update introduces an awesome new boss fight, Perception, the Overlord of Shadows. This multi-phase encounter features unique mechanics where you'll have to outsmart attacks, targeting your own reflection, which is kinda terrifying. Additionally, there's a brand new battlesuit for the Valkyrie Songchoi. This battlesuit offers two forms, featuring a transformation in which Songchoi vanishes and reappears with a new look and abilities. In the main story, old characters like Raiden Mei and Bronya are reintroduced as they encounter new faces from the recent storyline. The game is free to play and available on mobile devices, Steam, Epic Games. It even works on Mac. If you own technology, you can probably play this game. So if you're interested, you can check out the game through the link in the description below and use the code SHADOWSHOW for some additional bonus rewards. So thanks again, Honkai Impact 3rd, for sponsoring this video. I definitely appreciate it. And now it's time for us to get into the mods. And once again, I'm going to be separating these into categories, starting with what I'd consider some of the more essential mods. And right off the bat, we're going to be replacing Optifine, which I used in the last video, with a combination of Embeddium and Oculus. And personally, I'm not really going to be using a shader for this video, so you don't necessarily need Oculus. However, I will still leave some options when it comes to shaders if you'd like to use them, so I'm going to include it anyway. Also, if you'd like to boost your performance even further, you can always try the Acedium mod, which you can only use if you're using a NVIDIA graphics card. This is a forge port of the wonderful Embeddium mod, which is known for its extreme performance gains, although this particular version you can only find on GitHub, which it lists its reasons why. But I mean, it seems to work pretty good for me, so if you don't have any problems with it and you can use it, you might as well. Next, I've installed the Sinytra Connector mod, and this is a really cool mod that allows you to use fabric mods in Forge. It's extremely useful, and I'm obviously going to use it for some of the mods I'll be including here, although I will try to keep the usage of fabric mods fairly low within this, as there can be a lot of issues potentially, but all the mods I did include seem to work fine, and I'll let you know when those come along. And immediately, we'll be using a fabric mod. In Part 1, I used the Vanilla Vistas mod to provide some new terrain generation, however, sadly, that isn't updated to the newest version anymore, which is quite unfortunate because I thought the terrain was pretty awesome. But it hasn't been updated since 1.16.5, and we're on 1.20.1 for this video, so we need a replacement. And I've decided to go with the Terra mod. Of all the mods available for this version, I believe this provides the most detailed and unpredictable terrain, and Elden Ring, especially the DLC, has a lot of very vertical areas, and this mod can certainly provide that. Now, one of the best parts of Elden Ring is seeing absolutely massive dungeons and areas in the distance and knowing you're going to be able to explore them. And in Minecraft, you generally can't see that far away unless we install Distant Horizons. And pretty immediately, mods like When Dungeons Arise are going to be much better, as you can see giant structures off in the distance now. And obviously, this will make you much more likely to discover a bunch of locations, because before you have this narrow strip of land that you're going to be able to see, and now the amount of visible land is just going to be exponentially larger. And an alternative way you could have a higher render distance is if you installed the Acedium mod. Your performance may be good enough that you can just set your render distance to 32, then within the settings for Acedium, set region keep distance to really whatever you want, and when you explore, the chunks you've already been in will stay loaded. So if you're not necessarily a fan of how distant terrain looks with Distant Horizons, this is absolutely an alternative worth taking a look at. You'll also want to install Continuity, which also happens to be our next fabric mod. Without it, the Conquest Resource Pack, which is what we've been using for this video and all of the last one, just simply won't work quite right. Plus, you'll also need Fabric SkyBoxes along with Fabric SkyBoxes Interop in order to get Conquest Sky to display correctly. And speaking of the Conquest Resource Pack, I know this one's kind of divisive as to whether or not people actually like it. I've seen a fair bit of comments saying, for example, it looks grainy in the distance. Personally, I don't really have this issue, and I really like how it looks. However, I will provide an alternative, and that would be the Alacrity resource pack. Alacrity is much newer than Conquest and doesn't have the issue Conquest has in that it's specifically built for Optifine, and you can always combine these resource packs. For example, if you'd like to keep Conquest Sky, just simply place it below Alacrity in the loading order, and you should have Alacrity's textures with Conquest Sky. Really, which texture pack you'd like to use is going to solely come down to opinion. For the most part, I'm still going to be using Conquest in this video, but I'll still switch to Alacrity at times so you can see what it looks like in different situations. So, now that we've installed the essentials, it's time to look at the meaty mods, the mods that are going to be providing us with most of our content. And we'll start this off with mods that focus on enemies and structures. The first of which being Ender's Cataclysm. This is one of the most impressive mods I've ever come across, providing what I'd probably just call the best boss fights you can get in Minecraft. Everything this mod does, it does at an exceptional level. The bosses look awesome, their animations are smooth, their sound effects are just amazing, there's crazy visual effects constantly happening, the dungeons that house these bosses have great designs. I mean, they even have their own boss music. Elden Ring is known for its fantastic boss fights, and considering Cataclysm's bosses are within Minecraft, it is absolutely doing it justice. Cataclysm's bosses are essentially going to feature as the main enemies in your game, especially considering that they're quite difficult and really meant to be fought later. Bosses of Mass Destruction is up next, and this is a mod I specifically mentioned as wanting to use in the last video. However, at the time, it was only available for Fabric. Now, it's been ported to Forge, and I'm quite happy about it. The mod provides 4 more boss fights for you to come across, and once again, these are very high quality bosses. There's a reason I specifically mentioned it last time. I was very sad I couldn't include it. You've got bosses like the Nether Gauntlet, which is literally a fist that continually flies at you, and the Void Blossom, a really cool fight against a flower. And you know, we saw something kind of like this in Shadow of the Erdtree. The next mod I've added is Dungeon Now Loading 1%, and the description states, our goal is simple, to add 100 new dungeons and bosses to the game, which I don't think sounds so simple, but hey, I like the ambition. Currently, the title is at 1% because it only adds 1 new structure to the game, although I'm putting only in quotations there because this structure is absolutely massive and just full of content. It's called The Labyrinth, and it lives up to that title. You're easily gonna get lost in this thing, and at the very end of it, you're once again gonna have another boss fight. I'll also be adding the Castle Dungeons mod, which adds procedurally generated castles to your world, and Elden Ring has its fair share of castles, so we should absolutely have this mod installed. Additionally, I'm including 80% abandoned villages, which does exactly what it says, because you know, most of the village-like areas in Elden Ring are quite abandoned, at least by anything friendly. And just like the last video, I'm going to include pretty much all of the Young Nick Young's world generation mods, not including the ones we installed the last go around. I'll be adding desert temples, end island, jungle temples, nether fortresses, ocean monuments, and witch huts. Now, onto the next section of mods, we're going to be focusing on equipment and loot. And these first couple of mods add a feature from Elden Ring that I really appreciate, and this is the ability to put a lantern on your character so you can see in the dark rather than just walking around blind. So you'll need to install the mods Radiant Gear and Curious Lanterns, and combined with a few other mods that should be installed by now, you can equip a lantern to the slot on your hip and freely explore dark areas with both your hands available, which I'd say is quite convenient. Now, in the last video, we installed the mod Epic Knights, which adds all kinds of new armor and weapons to the game, and we're going to expand on this with a couple of add-ons, these being Epic Knights Addon and Epic Knights Slavic Armory. Now, the amount of armor and weapons available to you is just going to be downright insane, not even mentioning the equipment added from the other mods. And a really great addition to all of this Epic Knights content is the Knights Armory resource pack, which is going to double the resolution of everything from Epic Knights and both of the add-ons we installed. Another great addition for the Epic Fight mod is Epic Fight Knuckles Extended, which simply adds some knuckle-based weapons to the game, which again, we do see those in Elden Ring. So now, if you'd like, you can just punch things to death. And the final mod we'll be installing for this section is Epic Fight Impactful. This will just make your attacks feel more dangerous and weighty. There'll be screen shake, some weapons will hit the ground and kind of split it apart. Overall, a very worthwhile inclusion. Now, for our final major section, we're mainly going to be focusing on mods that introduce a variety of gameplay changes. And the first of these mods, which is absolutely massive and I'm incredibly excited about, is Irons, Spells, and Spellbooks. In the last video, I mentioned that I really wanted to include Electroblob's Wizardry because it's a fantastic magic mod and Elden Ring has a lot of magic in it, so I figured we needed something like that. But sadly, that mod's not updated past 1.12. But this mod is insane, truly. Easily worthy of Electroblob's Wizardry. It's got dozens upon dozens of spells to use, new structures to explore, new enemies to fight, and it's incredibly well made too. Nothing about it feels poorly executed. I'd say this is tied with the Cataclysm mod when it comes to the most important content mods we're adding into this pack, especially because, again, there's so much magic in Elden Ring, and that was kind of lacking in the previous video. Next, I'll be installing the Bonfires mod, which will be replacing Campfire Spawn and Tweaks, along with the Estus mod. And this brings in the feature from Elden Ring, in which you can rest at a site of grace and teleport between them, although it is a little more Dark Souls themed, but that's okay. It also provides an Estus Flask, which is just a multi-use healing potion, which gets filled up when you rest at a bonfire. I would love to see a feature within this mod that makes it so these bonfires randomly generate throughout your world, as the bonfires are kind of expensive to craft. But other than that, it's a great mod and, you know, obviously needs to be included. The next mod I've installed is RPG Stats, which allows you to level up some stats after you've killed a certain amount of mobs. The mod's fairly basic and only has 4 categories to level up, but it should help you get stronger for the late game. I also decided to include passable foliage, so when you're exploring your world, you're not going to constantly get hung up running into trees and bushes, and this is especially helpful on horseback. After that, I've added loot beams relooted, which will add a colorful beam of light coming from most dropped items, and this is kind of along the lines of how loot appears in Elden Ring, so you know, definitely a mod I'd like to include. On a side note, for some reason these beams of light are only visible to me from like 3 blocks away. I checked the config and it says they're supposed to render at 48 blocks, but maybe I'm overlooking something. It certainly happens, and if any of you know how to fix this, definitely let me know in the comments. I've also included ambient sounds, so the world sounds just, you know, a little more alive, and I've also included the enhanced audio resource pack to replace a bunch of the sounds, so it sounds a little less like Minecraft. Plus, I customized it just a little bit for personal use. In the first Elden Ring video, I used the mod Immersive FX, however, that's a mod that sadly isn't updated to the current version. I did open up the mod for myself and place all of its sound files inside of enhanced audio. So for our next mod, I've included reactive music, Adventure Redefined, and on its own, this music really doesn't sound like Elden Ring, but I mean, I guess it's closer than Minecraft music is. It's kind of overall just more general fantasy music, but if you'd really like to, you can customize this mod to use Elden Ring's music. It would take a bit of time to do so. I did about a third of it just as a proof of concept, and it works decently well. But again, I'm not about to just include Elden Ring's entire soundtrack in a mod pack. I'm pretty sure that would be fairly frowned upon. One of the last mods we'll be installing is a mod that brings a feature many would call, I guess, iconic from the Soul series, and this is when you die, it simply pops up text that just says, "You died." So now, every time you die, the game's just gonna rub it in your face. And finally, the last mod I decided to install, and is kind of more for the mod pack, I suppose, although you can set it up yourself, is custom starter gear. I've set it up in a way so that you start with some armor from Epic Knights, some bonfires you can just use right away, a spell from Iron Spells and Spellbooks that allows you to summon a horse. Really, items I just think it would make sense to start with for this pack. So now that we've got all these mods installed, I'll show you some gameplay of me just getting absolutely destroyed. At this point, I feel we've done a pretty good job of turning Minecraft into at least an Elden Ring style game. There is some other stuff I'd like to mention though. For starters, I would like to at some point, perhaps for the mod pack, improve the loot. Some of these mods do place their items into chests you come across in the world. However, other mods like Epic Knights, as far as I could tell, you really just don't find naturally. I also think it'd be pretty cool to be able to select a starting class, something similar to what you get in the Origins mod. Also, if you try this for yourself and notice your character and other creatures have kind of broken shadows, I narrowed this down to coming from the Geckolib mod. If you disable your resource packs and then re-enable them, it seems to fix the issue, but you know, this is just a temporary solution, and if you want to get rid of these shadows, you're just gonna have to turn off entity shadows. And the last thing I'll mention, it's kind of just optional. If you feel there's too many structures throughout your world, you can always install a mod like Sparse Structures, which will simply just make it so they're not quite as common. And anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. It was a pretty big one, and if there's any other features you think should be included, let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll put them in the mod pack if it's a good one. I'll have it linked in the description, along with all the mods that I've used. And if you guys enjoyed, definitely be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and until next time, thanks for watching.